Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hope you're doing well. We're continuing our reading of Friedrich Nietzsche's Thus Spoke Zarathustra. It is a nice rainy day. It's daylight savings time, so the sun goes down early. And let's begin. Go ahead and listen to this as you're eating, you're relaxing, going on a nice walk. You never know. Anyway, you consume the content. Hope you enjoy. Alright, now let's begin. We were in the section that was called On War and Warriors. Okay? And if your thought be vanquished, then your honesty should still find cause for triumph in that. You should love peace as a means to new wars. Oh my gosh, look at that. Love peace as a means to new wars. And the short peace more than the long. To you I do not recommend work, but struggle. So this is interesting. He puts a difference between work and struggle. Work can kind of have a methodology to it, and a rhythm. Struggle is like a grappling, it's a strife. Yet some struggle when they work, right? To you I do not recommend peace, but victory. That's interesting. So with loss can come peace. With victory can come peace as well. But I think he's just focusing on movement. That you need to chase after victory, seek victory, and that peace is something still, kind of accepting the way things are, not trying to make drastic change. Let your work be a struggle. Let your peace be a victory. One can be silent and sit still only when one has bow and arrow. Now that's interesting because you still have a weapon, but you have to be quiet. You have to be able to aim well. The archer is a very unique figure, isn't it? Else one chatters and quarrels. Let your peace be a victory. You say it is the good cause that hallows even war. The good cause that hallows war. That's unique. I say unto you, it is the good war that hallows any cause. Okay, so notice this. Good cause versus good war. War and courage have accomplished more great things than love of the neighbor. Oh my gosh. That is so savage. That is just right to the point, isn't it? That is very insightful. What do you think? Does the love of neighbor in the world, has that caused more change than war? Because war quite deliberately changes the landscape. It changes everything. Not your pity, but your courage has so far saved the unfortunate. Now that's interesting. Instead of pitying people, having courage is more noteworthy. Ask yourself, what do you think saves more people, pity or courage? What is good, you ask? To be brave is good. Let the little girl say, to be good is what is at the same time pretty and touching. Now this is interesting. He contends that bravery is good, and that little girls, they focus more on it being pretty and touching, where it moves your heart. The good has this kind of emotional softness to it, whereas he's saying it's more of the boldness of bravery and courage. Like, wow. I think you need both. I think what is good is it has both of those dynamics. They call you heartless, but you have a heart, and I love you for being ashamed to show it. Now that's interesting. He's proud that they're ashamed to show that they have a heart, because you don't want to be a bleeding heart. You can become quite narcissistic and deranged when you begin to have a bleeding heart for everything, right? But if you're heartless, there's a point where you might have to have that, but mercy is godly. Mercy is needed in the world, but there's a time and place for mercy. You are ashamed of your flood, while others are ashamed of their ebb. So notice this, the ebb and flow of things. So the flood is like how everything gets swarmed and ruined, and then the ebb is how the current is moving. So someone's always ashamed of something, ain't they? You are ugly? Well then, my brothers, wrap the sublime around you, the cloak of the ugly. And when your soul becomes great, that it becomes prankish, and in your sublimity there is sarcasm. I know you. In sarcasm the prankster and the weakling meet. That's true. I mean, comedy is quite funny. But they misunderstand each other. I know you. You may have only enemies whom you can hate, not enemies you despise. You must be proud of your enemy. Then the success of your enemy are your successes too. That's interesting. I never thought of that before. You have only enemies whom you can hate, not enemies who you despise. So if you hate your enemy, it's a different feeling. Even though when you despise someone, you do hate them, but you can hate someone without despising them. So if you despise someone, it's like a really strong disdain. You're like, I despise you. Like, you just don't like them, right? If you hate them, it's like you can get more of a friendship with someone you hate rather than someone you despise. If you've despised someone, it's a lot harder to repair that into admiration or civility. You must be proud of your enemy. Now, this is interesting because some say you can measure a man by the power of his enemies. Who has he offended? His greatness is determined by his enemies. Some say. That's interesting. And that if you do that, you become proud of your enemy, their successes are your successes too. But what if their successes are over you and they subjugate you? Recalcitrance, that is the nobility of slaves. Your nobility should be obedience. So our nobility should be obedience. We as Muslims are obedient to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We'll become more noble in the station because of that. Your very commanding should be in obeying. Whoa, I can see that. Your commanding should be in obeying. We hear and we obey the commands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. To a good warrior thou shalt sounds more agreeable than I will. And everything you like, you should first let yourself be commanded to do. Everything you like, you should first let yourself be commanded to do. Your love of life shall be love of your highest hope. That's interesting. Your love of life is your highest hope. It's like has a relationship. Your highest hope will show your love of life. And your highest hope shall be the highest thought of life. So we have here highest hope, highest thought, and then love of life. Your highest thought, however, should receive as a command from me, and it is man is something that shall be overcome. So man is something that shall be overcome. Thus live your life of obedience and war. What matters long life? What warrior wants to be spared? I do not spare you. I love you thoroughly, my brothers in war. Thus spoke Zarathustra. Now this is interesting. What warriors want to be spared? If you're a warrior, you don't want to be spared. You want to have the battle. You crave the battle. You want it. You don't want to die, but you want victory. Because remember how he said, let peace be your victory? But don't just wallow in peace. The peace should be a means to new wars. That you should seek your war and wage it. That's fascinating. Unworn warriors. So he's addressing these. To be good is what it is at the same time. So here he's really talking to warrior-minded people. And I love you thoroughly. Kind of shows that this camaraderie that he's trying to get at, where he knows that these veterans, these warriors, they don't want to be still. They want action, adrenaline, but to discipline themselves, to be good warriors. I found it interesting, the play on words of that a good warrior will say, "Thou shalt, then I will." Fascinating. So the warriors having the highest hopes, warriors having the love of life, but you live your life of obedience and war. It's a very contest of wills, isn't it? It's a very intense form of thinking. What do you think? What did this make you think about? Because he mentions the prankster and the weakling. Well, those are people who do things that someone of a more noble-minded nature wouldn't do. He doesn't want the nobility of a slave. Fascinating. Really introspective.